That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you. And that one stung. That one stung. Doesn't matter. And we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about perspective. We're gonna talk about moral victories. We got plenty to talk about coming off that Green Bay Packers loss, but it is another loss to the Green Bay Packers. We're gonna talk about all of it. We're gonna talk about it with Dan Wiederer of The Athletic. He's going to be by here in just about 15, 20 minutes after I get done ranting and raving and talking about it's not the same old Bears, but in some cases it's the same old Bears. So let's get into this. Let's start with the moral victory thing. I am not a moral victory guy. I am not sitting there applauding the Bears for being close. And I think we're going to get into Green Bay Packers fans too, because they need to pipe down. They really do. Not about giving crap about the Bears and whatever and rivalry and all that, whatever. But I'm talking about that Packers fans trying to tell Bears fans how to fan. That we don't need. We're going to get into that as well. But let's start with the moral victory thing, because I am not a believer in moral victories. This is not some, one versus, and it doesn't even work anymore because the 16 seeds have won in the NCAA tournament, but these like 1 versus 16 seeds, where they're a 35-point underdog and they took Duke to the, they were tied with Duke with 2 minutes to go and they lost by 4, and they can hold their heads high because it's a moral victory because they went, wall to wall with Duke. This isn't, Mystery Alaska where a bunch of townies hung in there with the New York Rangers. Those are moral victories, right? Like the Bears are a professional football team, period. The Packers are a professional football team, period. There's no moral victories there. The Bears pay people to play football. The Packers pay people to play football. And the Packers people tend to be better than the Bears people over the last 35 years. That's where we're at, right? It's pretty laid out, plain and simple. So yeah, there's no moral victories in professional sports as far as I'm concerned. The Bears were in first place in the NFC. Now they're in 7th place in the NFC and clinging to a wild card spot. It is that jumbled up in the NFC. It's that competitive. There is no margin for error. And the Chicago Bears just need to make sure that they stay focused and win football games. And they went up to Lambeau Field. They went up there expecting to win, and they did not win. That is a loss. Take the L. It sucks, and move forward. It does not mean that you need to rant and rave and say the season's over and the Bears suck and they can never beat the Packers. You need to keep perspective. And Packers fans seem to think that having perspective is a moral victory. And those are two very different things. And I tried to tweet about that. It's not a moral victory. The Bears lost. It sucks. Period. End of story. The Bears are still having their best season in a long time. They have the Packers coming up at home in a couple weeks. And if they split with the Packers, the odds were they were going to lose in Lambeau and win at Soldier Field. And they still have the opportunity to do that. And there's no reason, based on how the two teams looked at Lambeau, to think that the Bears can't win in Chicago. There's no guarantee they will win in Chicago, but there's no reason to think they will not win in Chicago. I think the Packers will be favored in that game. They're probably going to be like a field goal favorite, something like that. But that doesn't mean that the Chicago Bears can't easily go in there and win that football game. They've been underdogs in many games this season and pulled out the win. So when I look at this game, and yes, there are positive and negatives to this game, I don't look at the moral victory aspect. There isn't a moral victory. The Bears lost. That's the end of the story. The Bears are having a good season, and the way they played at Lambeau, the way they battled back against an excellent football team should be applauded, and you should be excited about that. But it doesn't mean you should be like shrugging your shoulders, oh, it's no big deal, they lost, give them a moral victory. No, that's not it. And Ben Johnson's not going to take a moral victory either. But Ben Johnson is going to appreciate that his team battles and fights and does not give up and plays to the whistle. There is a distinct difference there. And now, as for Packers fans, I was going to save this for the end of the monologue, but I'm going to talk about this now because, look, Packers fans want to call Bears fans clowns and do all their crap. That's fine. Like, the Bears fans, they get to enjoy a world-class city, and the Packers fans don't. They live in a little state that has very little to do. And they don't even live near Milwaukee where there's things to do. I mean, I understand there's Packers fans all throughout the state, but in Green Bay, look, it's a bizarre thing that they have a football team. They support that football team. It's their entire lives. You got to appreciate that the Packers fan that lives in Green Bay, their entire world is the Green Bay Packers. They don't have anything else. Like, I think if you go on Yelp or whatever, like the second or third best restaurant is Culver's. Like, that's where they're at in Green Bay. It's a little podunk town, and there's not much to do. But they have a professional football team, which, Bears fans, don't let them forget that the reason they have a professional football team is George Halas. If you don't know the history lesson, George Halas bailed out the Packers. The Packers were broke. They were going to go under in the early years, the first, 20 years of the National Football League in the 30s, I think it was. They were going broke and they were going to go under. And George Halas said, you know what? Having the Bears and the Packers, that's a good rivalry. That's good for the league. George Halas gave the Packers money so that they could pay their bills and not go bankrupt and go under. He saved the Packers franchise. And the Packers fans can sit there and say, I was 90 years ago. You wouldn't have a team. Doesn't matter if it was 90 years ago or 10 years ago, he saved your franchise. It would have folded. That would have been the end of the Green Bay Packers. The NFL would have eventually expanded back to Milwaukee, not Green Bay, several decades later, and that would have been the end of the Green Bay Packers. George Halas saved that little franchise, and the Packers fans want to think that the Bears are some joke of a franchise, and they've been horrendous. And that's the thing, is I think a lot of Bears fans do have perspective. They know how bad the football team's been, and there's a blip in 2018 and a couple blips with Lovey. But for the most part, if you're a Bears fan and you're 40 years or younger, you don't remember any kind of sustained success. I'm old enough. I got a few years on that. I was a little kid, but I do remember the 80s Bears, and I was at those. I was at the Washington game in 85. I was at the Rams game in 85. I was at the Niners game in 88, the playoff game. Like, I was at these games where the Bears were a legitimate team. And if the Bears had a quarterback, shock me. Tell me if you've heard this one before. If the Bears had a quarterback, they probably would have won more championships. But Jim McMahon died, his shoulder stopped working, and they had Mike Tomczak. That's not going to win you championships. That's just how it works. So that's where the Chicago Bears were then, but they haven't had sustained success. True, I don't consider Lovie Smith sustained success because Lovie, for the most part, was an 8-9 win coach and had a couple good seasons. You know, obviously they made a Super Bowl. That's a great season. But sustained success for me is, 11-6, 12-5, 12-5, 13-4, 14-3, back to 12-5, 10-7, 12-5, where you have 5, 6, 7 consecutive seasons in a row of winning double-digit games. That's sustained success. The Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Rams, those are teams with sustained success. Doesn't mean they're all winning championships, but they got a place at the table. And I think that's where the Bears are finally headed with Ben Johnson, is sustained success. And I think fans see that. And I think because of that, fans have a lot of perspective this year. This is the most rational I think the Bears fan base has ever been in all my years of being on social media. Look, it's tough to know you have the pulse of the fan base in 1996, but since social media has existed, and I know not every Bears fan is on social media, that's just a small percentage of Bears fans, but I think it's a pretty good slice, and it's more extreme fandom on social media than not. So when you see social media and you see mostly rational Bears fans who are saying, I'm enjoying this season, this is a good season, I am not worried about expectations, Super Bowl or bust, any of that. I'm going to enjoy that and see where they're at, because I understand as a fan, they are ahead of schedule. And I think That's where Bears fans are. Bears fans have a rational approach to this season. And Packers fans are sitting there saying, oh, they're taking moral victories. The Bears fans are a joke. You know what? Just bugger off. Okay? Go enjoy the Morris Cheese Castle. Have some fun there and be on your way. All right? Like, just because Bears fans have perspective and Packers fans don't. I saw a Packer fan saying that Bears fans are a joke because they're not upset enough that they lost to the Packers. Meanwhile, as Packer fans, we want Matt LaFleur fired after victories. You're actually admitting stupidity there, not fandom. Stupidity. That's what you're announcing as a Packer fan. Packers fans are dumb and they're spoiled. I'm not saying all Packers fans are dumb. I'm sure there are some smart Packers fans. I haven't met many of them, but I'm sure they do exist. I am sure they are more prevalent than unicorns. Small percentage higher. But at the same time, saying that Bears fans aren't screaming at Caleb Williams and calling him a jackass because he threw an interception, or calling for Ben Johnson's head because you may not have liked his third down call in the second quarter, that's irrational fandom. That's what the Packers think is normal because, again, it's their whole world. They got nothing else in Wisconsin. So Bears fans and Packers fans are two different breeds. We love our teams just as much as the other one. But we, as Chicagoans, have more things in our lives than Packers fans. That's the way it is. I'm sorry, Packers fans, if you're listening to this, if you get a snippet of it, you're probably pissed off, but you also know it's true. Because if you say, yes, you should be asking for Matt LaFleur's head because they beat a crappy team by 3 instead of 2 touchdowns, you're irrational. And you do not have intelligence and you do not have perspective on your football team. Like, I can sit here and argue with Packers fans that when you have 2 of the arguably top 10 to 12 quarterbacks in league history for a 35-year stretch, you should win more than 2 Super Bowls. I'm not saying you can't enjoy the Favre Super Bowl and you can't enjoy the Rodgers Super Bowl, but you should have perspective and know that, you know what? We should have had probably 4, 5 Super Bowls over that 35-year stretch. You should. Plain and simple. You should have one more. But Brett Favre couldn't beat the Cowboys. Then he couldn't beat John Elway. Then he started fading. Aaron Rodgers couldn't beat the Niners. Had issues in the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers, the most mind-boggling guy who can be insanely clutch and make the most. The Jared Cook throw against the Cowboys is still one of the best throws I've ever seen a quarterback make. And then he can choke away a game and not score any points against the 49ers in the playoffs. Maddening. And as a Packers fan, you should have perspective. Not be like, we win all the time and you don't win, and therefore you suck and we're great. No one's arguing that the Bears haven't been bad for decades. We have perspective. Like, you should be able to look at your team and you sit there and say, you should be screaming for Matt LaFleur's head when he doesn't win enough, and then say it's okay that you're not winning Super Bowls. Like, bottom line here, the Chicago Bears, this is their first year of a rebuild. And for Packers fans, you traded for Micah Parsons. And you sat there and hammered Bears fans in 2018 and said the Khalil Mack trade was off or not because the Bears didn't win anything despite their great 2018 season. And if you want to have that stance, then fine. Then you better understand that the Packers' goal this year is to win the Super Bowl. You traded 2 first-round picks for Micah Parsons. You should win the Super Bowl. And if you make the playoffs and you lose to the Rams, you didn't have a successful season. The Bears' goals and the Packers' goals were very different at the start of this season. And that's why Bears fans can have perspective and Packers fans can scream and yell about how Matt LaFleur should be fired, and I'm mad at Jordan Love for this interception, and I'm going to rant and rave and scream and talk about despite my team winning football games, I'm going to focus on the negatives, but then when they lose, I'm going to say it was a successful season. You can't tell me my team wasn't a success. You had a winning record, doesn't mean it was successful, because the bars of success are different right now for both franchises. And yes, The Bears bar is lower because the Bears franchise has been a joke for years. For years. One blip in 2018. That's it for George McCaskey's reign. That is it. So when we look at this coming from two different areas. So Green Bay Packers fans having the audacity to tell Bears fans how to fan, shut up, stay in your little state, stay above the border. I don't want to see you in Gurnee. I don't want to see you anywhere near there. Don't go dipping down to Waukegan. Stay away. Certainly don't come to Chicago. We don't need to see you there. Enjoy your cheese. Have some curds. Enjoy your Culvers. Have the butter burger. It's a nice little restaurant. You got plenty to do up there. Go take the Lambeau tour again. I'm sure you've done it 17,000 times. Anyways, let's talk about the game here because the game was frustrating. It should be frustrating because you just felt that the Bears just weren't clicking. And then when they finally started clicking, it was a little too late. That first half, I saw a lot of Bears fans criticizing Ben Johnson's game plan. They didn't like what was going on there. To me, I am a guy that I like to see the full game play out because I don't think there's a coach in the league that finds more success in the second half consistently than Ben Johnson has found this year. And I don't think, I think, it's the Bears magic. They're lucky. It's not luck. It's Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson puts his players in a position to succeed because he's taken the data points from the first half and the third quarter, and he keeps building on that. This is how the Packers are going to respond to this. This is what the Packers are going to do here. He takes that information, he processes it, and says, well, then this should work. And he runs the plays, and the plays work. And does he need the team to execute? Absolutely, he needs the team to execute. But the bottom line here is sometimes the Bears are going to have a slow start because they need to figure things out because they aren't as far ahead as their record is right now. They are ahead of schedule. So yes, sometimes there's going to be a slow start. And the passing game was awful in the first half. Was it Ben's fault? Was it Caleb's fault? Was it the receiver's fault? Was it everybody's fault? Yes. Yes, it was. But seeing that passing game come together in the second half and seeing the throws that Caleb Williams makes, that's something to build on. And we need to see this passing game come together. If we want the Bears to make noise this year, that passing game has to come together. And I don't know when it's going to come together. Like San Francisco is about the time it needs to come together. They can beat the Packers at home if the offensive passing game is a little clunky. They can beat Cleveland at home if the passing game is a little clunky. San Francisco, that's a bad defense. Like it's going to have to click before the playoffs. And if it does, we can sit here and talk about the Bears getting hot at the right time. And if it doesn't, that's okay. We weren't expecting the Bears to be where they're at now anyway. Hopefully it clicks early in 2026, like right out of the gate, week 1, week 2, week 3, that passing game really comes together. That's been the hope. And I said this back in August that I did not think this was all going to be humming by September. I didn't know how long it was going to take. I didn't know if it was going to take a half season, the full season, the run game, and the pass game. Now, the run game has rounded into form. We are seeing all 22 guys, all the analysts, they love the running scheme. They love how Ben Johnson is mixing different concepts together. I love how I see how Ben Johnson is putting offensive linemen in positions to succeed on the second level. As an offensive lineman, I hated the second level. I was pretty slow. I was more of the big bruising type that didn't have the quickest feet in the world. But if I got my body on a guy, then they weren't going anywhere. That was basically my strength as an offensive lineman. So I wanted a guy lined up in my gap in the direction where I wanted to take him, and I wanted to pulverize him. That's what I wanted. When I lined up, if I knew I needed to take my guy to the right and he was lined up on my right shoulder, I was thrilled because I already, before the snap, I knew I had won. When I line up and I see that I know my target is going to be at the second level, it's going to be a linebacker, and I know like I have to get to his left, his right, I have to get to my left and kind of corner him off from like an off tackle run. And I know he's already got a half step over there. I'm like, oh crap. Like now I feel like I'm going to lose this rep before the rep has even started. And I think offensive linemen think that way a lot. It's not like they give up. It's not like if I'm sitting there going, I got to do a reach block on a linebacker that I think I'm going to lose. But I understand that the odds are stacked against me. And I understand that when I've got a guy lined up exactly where I want to take him, that I'm going to be able to win that rep and win it easily. So it's not, am I going to win this rep? It's how much am I going to win this rep by? Can I pancake him? Can I just blow him out of the area completely? And how big of a hole am I going to be able to create for the running back? Like, that's the level of confidence you have. For years, we have seen the Chicago Bears run scheme that constantly put offensive linemen in a position to make difficult blocks. And sometimes it can't be avoided because the defensive coordinator does a great job of lining up his pieces where they need to be. But it felt like every play, it was a difficult block that an offensive lineman had to make in a lot of these schemes. That's not the case with Ben Johnson. Like, you're seeing the offense move in a way and flow together where the offensive linemen are able to chip and get out to the second level and make the blocks they need to make and wall people off and do what they need to do without putting them in a difficult position. So I'm seeing that with the running game. And you just kind of see it with the passing game, that it's not just clicking just yet. And it just like, who is the biggest issue? Is it that everyone needs to be on the same page? Is it Caleb's accuracy? Is it that receivers don't know exactly where they're supposed to be? I think with Luther Burden, people were screaming for Luther Burden to get more snaps. And yeah, he's a very talented player. He needed to be out on the field more. But at the same time, like, I had heard from someone months ago that Luther was on the field as much as he should be on the field. And I really thought that was interesting. Now, they didn't go into details why, but the easy jump there was to speculate that, you know, it was a full grasp of the playbook that he probably didn't have at that point. And now you're seeing Luther out on the field for more snaps. And when you're watching the All-22 or you're watching people who break down All-22 film, you're seeing Luther's making a few mistakes here and there. And that's an easy then thing to connect and say, yeah, Luther wasn't where he needed to be with the full playbook. He may still not be there with the full playbook. So the Bears have a lot of moving parts in this passing game in terms of where everyone needs to be for everything to click, and it's just not there yet. And Caleb Williams is his fault, and the receivers are at fault, and there are multiple people to blame here, and hopefully it comes together in the next few weeks. Everyone seems to think they're close. Even the analysts, they're like, oh, they're so close. Well, we need to just see it get over that line. It doesn't need to be perfect. I'm not saying we need the passing game to get all the way there. It's got to take another step forward if we want to see the Chicago Bears really make a push, not just to make the playoffs, but to win a game or two in the playoffs. It's going to be really interesting, and it's going to come down to what the Chicago Bears do here over the last few games of the season, because it's a tough position to be in right now in the NFC. Like, we're looking at teams possibly winning 9 games. Now, you know, Bears, there's the NFC South, which may have a 9-8 winner at this point. Tampa just can't figure things out. Carolina's just hanging in there. They play each other twice, so we'll see who wins that division with the head-to-heads. But the AFC, the bottom of the AFC is far more doable than it is in the NFC, because honestly, it is not crazy at all to say the Chicago Bears can win 11 games and miss the playoffs. You go 11-6 and miss the playoffs, that is absolutely brutal. But that's where the Chicago Bears are right now. They're sitting at 9-4. They beat Cleveland and beat Green Bay and moved to 11-4. Then if they lose to San Francisco, they're 11-5. And if they lose that last week of the year against Detroit, they fall to 11-6. They had lost to San Francisco in that case. If San Francisco finishes 11-6 and they're at 9-4 right now, shouldn't be too difficult for them to finish with 11 wins. If they beat the Bears, which they did in that scenario, that's a 10th win. They just need to win one more game. That gets them to 11. That means the 49ers jump the Bears. And if they lost to Detroit, that means Detroit, who's currently at 8-5, they just need to win 2 more games. They would get up to 11 games then at that point, and they would have the tiebreaker with the Bears. And at that point, the Bears are toast. 11-6 the Bears had missed the playoffs. So, man, you yell a bunch, you start getting that dry throat. So the Bears are in a tough spot because 11-6, they need help to get into the playoffs. And that's hard to imagine. But again, they can beat San Francisco. They can take care of that tiebreaker. They can beat Detroit. I believe if they beat Detroit, odds are they will end up with the tiebreaker against Detroit the way everything else plays out, unless the Bears get swept by the Packers. But like, there's a lot of ins and outs on this. The Bears need to stay focused. They need to win games to get in the playoffs. If they get to 12, they're automatically in. I think that sounds obvious, but I think if you told people in October the Bears would win 11 games, you'd be like, great, they're a playoff team. Well, not necessarily. So they can't get ahead of themselves, beat Cleveland this week, and they really do need to beat Green Bay next week. And here's the thing, and this is where everything is so close. Green Bay plays Denver this week in Denver. If they lose that game and the Bears beat Cleveland, the Bears are back in first place by a half game. Then they play Green Bay. They could be up a game and a half on the Packers. And then the Packers have, the Ravens and Minnesota to finish the season. So the Bears could be at 11-4 and in first place in the NFC North and still in danger of missing the playoffs completely, because that there are, and I've been talking about this on this podcast for weeks, there are 8 quality teams in the NFC, and only 7 of them are going to make the playoffs. Now, I know that doesn't include Carolina, it doesn't include Dallas, and Philadelphia is certainly falling apart. That Monday night game was ugly. But bottom line is there's going to be one team sitting home in the NFC that honestly is deserving of going to the playoffs. So let's talk about the Packers game. Let's talk about the big picture. Let's talk Ben Johnson. Let's talk Ryan Poles. Let's talk about it all with Dan Wiederer of The Athletic. He joins me next. This is Bill Zimmerman, Bears Banter. We'll be right back. Welcome back into the podcast. Excited to talk to this gentleman. Usually when I have him on, he's either doing some expose about how the front office has failed or problems with the coaching staff or quarterback, but things are a lot more positive right now, despite coming off a loss. He is Dan Wiederer of The Athletic and, of course, the Take the North podcast, and he joins me now. Dan, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Bill, it is wonderful to be with you under these circumstances. I know, as you mentioned, it's been different over the years, and what a breath of fresh air this season has been in a lot of different regards. So, yeah, I think everybody's pretty excited for the change in storyline.
Yeah, it really has. And talking to various media members throughout this season, I've been doing this podcast 5-6 years. So really kind of just after 2018, and every media member kind of has the same feeling. It's so nice to be actually on the positive side of the coin, which so often we're needing to criticize this team. But let's start with the Packers game, and let's dive into that one first and then do some bigger picture stuff. And let me start with what's really kind of been bubbling up on social media here and on, Chicago media. And that's moral victory about where the Bears are versus the Packers. And the way I look at it is you can separate two things. You can sit there and, as a fan, be upset the Bears lost to the Packers yet again, despite being competitive in the game, but still be able to pull back and look at what this team has built this year and be very excited for not just moving forward 2026 and beyond, but for the rest of this season as well.
Yeah, I don't believe in moral victories, but I do believe in perspective. And maybe there's some overlap between those two things as we're sort of unpacking this loss from Sunday at Lambeau Field. But this is a very different kind of loss than the Bears have experienced so many times against the Green Bay Packers. Look, like the way I described it coming out of Lambeau Field on Sunday is there have been a lot of times where you've walked out of that building and the Bears have been embarrassed and then they've been pointed at and laughed at. And that wasn't this, right? Like, this was a competitive game that came down to the final play. It was more evidence of the Bears having the resilience to battle inside of in-game adversity and find solutions and find answers and put themselves in position to win at the end. They've obviously done a lot of winning at the end this season. They didn't have the magical final play that they wanted on Sunday, but the dejection was different in that visiting locker room. It was still very heavy, but I think it was more so players understanding that they had a golden opportunity that was within reach, and it just slipped past. And the other part of this, Bill, I think, is when you look at those NFC standings and you realize that slip-up drops you from the top seed in the NFC all the way down to number 7. You've got this reality check moment, right? Of like, this is how thin the margin for error is. And these are the consequences and the costs of not playing your best football. The Bears obviously have to apply that going forward in these final 4 regular season games. But I think they can feel really good about their ability to compete in every single game they have left on the schedule.
I completely agree with that. And let me ask you, when you looked at this game, what, and it like you said, if you want to talk about it more about how they battled and they came back, or maybe there's a specific player or aspect of the team, what's one of your biggest positive takeaways from this game, and what's one of your more concerning takeaways from this game?
The biggest positive takeaway for me is easily the way that the offense found itself in the second half, because you walked into halftime thinking, man, they're a mess right now. 23 passing yards. They were 1 for 7 on third down. Couldn't get anything going. I thought probably one of the biggest sequences in the game was getting the CJ Gardner-Johnson interception and the return into plus territory and doing nothing with it. And now you go to halftime down 14-3. And yet in the second half, the offense came to life. You had 3 consecutive scoring drives. You score 18 points on those 3 possessions. The final drive of the game, you're inside the red zone. You're knocking on the door of a potential game-winning touchdown. And so to find yourself within a game isn't something we're always used to with Bears offenses that are struggling. And it's a testament to the resolve of the group. It's a testament of Ben Johnson to stick to his game plan. It's a testament to continue doing what you believe is your strength and finding ways to expose the defense. So that was certainly the most positive. I think probably if I'm having the initial reaction to the most negative, it's just the big plays they allowed on defense. You just got to reduce that by about 50%. There's obviously the 3 touchdown passes from Jordan Love. And then probably the killer is that 3rd and short run stop that they missed, right? Josh Jacobs gets loose despite being sort of hemmed in by 3 Bears defenders who all had a chance to kind of stop him there and force Green Bay into a field goal that changes the entire dynamics of that last possession. And so you just got to find a way, right? And I think that's probably been made very, very clear inside the building over the last 48 hours as the Bears have gotten themselves back onto steady ground. And these are the types of things that make the difference between 10-3 and 9-4.
Yeah, and I think one of those differences, big differences from last season to this season, is the improved offensive line play. Obviously, 4 new offensive linemen. The run game is really humming. Caleb Williams is getting ample protection most of the time. And look, and I know Bears fans are excited and they're going to go out and vote, and Pro Bowl voting doesn't mean everything, but you're seeing Darnell Wright and Dolman and Tooney and all the guys, they are up there. And when you look at their statistics as well, all of them are up towards the top in terms of the offensive line. So obviously the talent is there, and the talent is far improved. But Dan, the other thing I think is it's not just Ben Johnson, but I think it's Dan Rochar as well. I think a lot of us questioned, and I'm just going to say it, questioned Chris Morgan and some of the things that they were doing previously. And the way they put offensive linemen in positions to succeed, where they have achievable blocks and the entire cohesive scheme of the run game. I love what I'm seeing in terms of everything that not just the talent of the offensive line has, but what the coaches are doing to make them play even better.
I'm going to give you a little tangential soapbox rant before the end of this answer, but we'll start with the idea that this coaching staff seems to have a very united vision, and it's a clear vision for what they want the run game to look like, for what they want their offensive line to look like, and they've been able to really hit the bullseye with getting that vision to come to life. I reflect back on the combine last February. I guess it would have trickled into early March, but Ben Johnson making it clear that he felt like they could get this offensive line completely revitalized in one off season. And at the time, you're kind of, your eyebrows are raised. You're like, oh, wow. Okay. They think they can aggressively address a number of positions in this off season. To their credit, they went out and they got really aggressive in doing so. And I think probably the most underrated factor within that interior offensive line is the snap counts. These guys don't miss time. And that's such a huge deal for a Bears offense that over the years, you've seen it. You've seen the charts every year of how different the offensive line has looked from week to week to week to week. And here it's really just been left tackle. That's been the only place where there's been some of a revolving door. Otherwise, you're just getting reliability, you're getting durability, you're getting availability from these guys in a way that allows this offense to come to life in the way it has. When you mentioned Dan Rochar, I think he and Ben are a great match because they both believe in real straightforward honesty. And that's not only to their players, it's to us. And I think there's something valuable to being able to speak out loud where you see weakness and shortcomings. And then my rant is that I've always been stunned that in a cutthroat, physical, violent league like the NFL is, that coaches feel so hesitant to publicly criticize players. You're like, if your guys can't take public criticism, then how are they going to win a Super Bowl when they're playing, 4 games in January and February to win the sport's biggest prize? You have to have a level of mental toughness there. And I think this group believes in the mental toughness of their guys, and they're not afraid to call out mistakes, again, both inside the building and then just express them publicly in a way that gives that little extra push of, this is what we need to do to become a championship level team. And so I've been very appreciative of the coaching staff's ability to communicate that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And you talk about Ben Johnson saying he was going to flip the offensive line. As someone that was creating content and looking at free agents and everything, like, all right, everyone circled Drew Dolman. That wasn't a surprise. But you looked at the guards, and there was, Aaron Banks and Will Fries and these guys that they really were like, are these guys going to get overpaid? And Banks hasn't been great for Green Bay. You really had, like, I didn't understand where they were going to go. They go out and they make 2 trades. And it really did some creative things. And where I have been highly critical of Ryan Poles over the last couple of years on this podcast and in my writing, but like, I started talking about it last week, Dan. I mean, with the way the offensive line has flipped, the hiring of Ben Johnson, and again, it doesn't mean everything. Ryan Pace won this award as well and was fired a couple years later. But Ryan Poles, he could be in line for Executive of the Year.
We got a little something in store later this month at The Athletic, kind of going through what they've done in the calendar year of 2025 to put themselves in the position that they're in right now. And there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, it starts last January with the hiring of Ben Johnson, and then Ben coming in and being very clear with his vision. But it takes sort of that lockstep with your general manager to go get that stuff done and do it in a way that it positions your team to succeed. Now, you and I have had the discussion for years of tasting success is one thing, sustaining it is another. And so when you look at it through that lens, you're trying to figure out, are there things that are going to sort of potentially activate the trapdoors for this team to not be able to sustain some things? And so that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to look at when we get through the finish line of this regular season and start to explore 2026, because I think you do need to kind of identify what is firmly in place and what's just kind of in place and what's sort of like gonna put you on the verge of falling off. But to your point, nobody saw that this type of turnaround happening in this fashion. And if they did, they were probably drinking a little too heavily at a local Chicago watering hole. But yeah, it's been impressive the way that they have built this team to win and win now. And now again, the key is making sure you do it in a way that you can make it last, which has been a big problem in Chicago for 37, 40 years.
Yeah, certainly has. There has not been really sustained, because I don't even know if you can call Lovey sustained success, because it was like, you pop at those big seasons and then kind of regress back to 8-8, 9-7. So
yeah,
it consistent playoff contender. It's really been the mid 80s, which is really wild for this franchise. But the one thing, if they're going to have sustained success, Dan, they need to find a consistent passing game. The consistent running game has gotten there now. They're running the ball consistently. The Eagles game was a Monet. It still looked good against the Packers, but like you said, the first half passing game was atrocious, just 20 yards passing. And they do find moments, and they do find explosive plays, but we keep hearing it's close, and either Caleb Williams is inaccurate here, maybe the receiver runs the wrong route or doesn't break at the right moment. All these different things. It just seems like maybe Caleb thinks the receiver is going to keep running and he sits in his route. They keep seeming to be just off a page or two consistently. Are you seeing where you think this passing game might be close, or do you think there's a lot of different pieces that still need to get solved here for this to really come together and be a consistent weapon for Ben Johnson?
Well, it's interesting. I had a conversation last week with passing game coordinator Press Taylor, where he is of the belief that they're close, but he also was very forthright in saying, we can't keep saying we're close. Eventually you have to be not close anymore, right? Like, and be there. You have to have arrived. You can't just be close. And so there is a lot that goes into this. It's from the play caller to the quarterback to the route runners to the offensive line. All those things have to be in harmony. I struggle to look past quarterback inconsistency in this league and just go, oh, well, they'll figure it out, because we know so many times, not only in Chicago, but all across the league, you don't figure it out. And it becomes the thing that keeps you from reaching the heights that you think you can get to. And so I think there is healthy pressure on Caleb Williams to understand that his next leap is going to be the leap that changes the trajectory of where this Bears team ultimately can land. And so he's got to be very, very locked in to what his responsibilities are in enlivening this passing game. I think you've heard from Ben Johnson in recent weeks that if the first primary read is open, spit the ball out to him, get it there. Let's get to the next play. We'll find a way to get your big plays to start humming. Obviously, within that Green Bay game, you see some of the off-script brilliance that Caleb has. That pass down the Bears sideline to Cole Kmet for 26 yards was the sort of spark that the Bears needed. And it's a top 10 throw in the league this year, on the move and to put that ball where it was, it's a huge deal. Now you've just got to start to do the basic stuff more consistently and more successfully. Press Taylor had given me an example from the Eagles game where the Bears converted a 3rd and 7 against an all-out blitz with a slant to Olamide Zaccheaus, and you say to yourself, great, 9 yards, move the chains, huge play in the context of that football game. The coaching points inside the building were, if the route is a little crisper, if the throw is a little bit better, this gets out of the gates for a touchdown that breaks this game open. And then you have this example in Green Bay where Jordan Love does just that and hits Christian Watson against an all-out blitz with a slant, with a ball that puts him in position to just hit the moving walkway. CJ Gardner-Johnson's got no chance from behind chasing Christian Watson down. And all of a sudden you've got this huge touchdown that gives Green Bay such a huge thing of momentum. And that's it. It's, that's the difference between a 9-yard gain and a fist pump and the entire stadium erupting because you just scored a 41-yard touchdown.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's get over to the defensive side of the ball. Like you said, some concerns with some of the big plays. And look, I'm not pointing the finger and saying that if this had been different, they would have won the game, but they did get hurt in the slot a lot. Jordan Love really picked on him in the slot. And Kyler Gordon, of course, gets hurt pregame. And I think he's only played, I think it's 3 games this year. And now he's going to be out. It would appear to be multiple games again. They just paid him, and he's never missed this much time, but he has consistently missed 2, 3, 4 games a season over his first few games in the league. Is this something, Ben Johnson seemed to be frustrated talking about Kyler Gordon's availability. Is this something that maybe the Bears are having second thoughts about paying this guy, and this is the kind of unfortunate season he has just not been able to be on the field?
I feel like Ben's frustration has kind of been bubbling up here over the last month as he's tried to figure out what exactly they have in Kyler Gordon. He's heard about it, but he hasn't seen it with his own eyes. You mentioned the number of different injuries that have popped up since the start of the season. And Kyler's played 117 snaps this year. This is in the year after that they guaranteed him, I think it was $31.25 million on the extension that he got. That's not a return on investment, Bill, and it's a problem. And you could hear from Ben on Monday sort of being just a little bit frustrated that he doesn't have enough experience with Kyler on the field to know what's there. And that's maddening for a coach as you're trying to put together your puzzle, both short-term and long-term. Problematic for me is Kyler hasn't gotten hurt inside of a game this season. He gets hurt on a walkthrough day in week 1, the day before they play the Vikings in Monday Night Football. It's in a practice in week 8. It's in warmups this past weekend, and you're going, what's going on here? These aren't settings where you watch him, his leg bends funny in live game action, or he takes a huge hit or whatever it may be. You're like, how are these soft tissue injuries recurring inside of these forums where they shouldn't really be recurring? And you got to take an honest look at that when the season's over. I would imagine that right now, we're looking at it's December 9th. You can't really count on him being part of your plans the rest of this season. There's certainly no way he's playing this week. You wouldn't think that he'd be available in the next 2 or 3. So I wouldn't be shocked if they shut him down and then had to reevaluate exactly what's happening and what you can count on long-term. But that's a huge problem, in my opinion, when you have this player that you thought was going to be a huge chess piece for you. And then here we are in week 15 and he's played 117 snaps.
Yeah, and it opens up the door to a lot of questions about the secondary. And I think, I know we should be focusing on this season because there's plenty to talk about. But I love trying to figure out what they're going to do with this secondary because, CJ Gardner-Johnson has been excellent. Nahshon Wright has been excellent. Jalen Johnson's missed a lot of time. He makes a lot of money. Like we talked about Kyler Gordon, Brisker and Byard are both free agents. They have a lot of moving parts here, and they have basically, too many puzzle pieces to fit in the puzzle. They can't pay everybody and keep everybody. They can't pay backups $10, $11 million a year. What do you think? What do you think the solution is right now on this secondary in terms of who are the most important pieces to keep around for 2026?
Well, so you bring up an interesting point, and this circles back to what we were talking about the sustainable success piece of things, because you have to make sure that as you continue building going forward, that there aren't contracts that are going to weigh you down. And if Kyler Gordon truly is unreliable and not durable, that's going to be a contract that hurts you, right? Like, because it's not going to allow you to get, again, the return on investment for what you paid him, and then it's going to prevent you from going out and spending on other guys that could help your football team reach the next level. That's an example. I'm curious, and I'll come back to the secondary in about 5 seconds here, but the DJ Moore contract is one that you've got to look very closely at, because I think everyone's like, oh, you just got to trade him at the end of this year. Okay, well, who's trading for that contract, and how are you going to sweeten that deal if you are intent on moving on from DJ after this year? That's another storyline to keep eyes on. The secondary is interesting, though, because I feel like in guys like Kevin Byard and Nahshon Wright, you've got guys that fit. You've got guys that have earned the right to come back. Now you've got to find a price that makes sense. I feel like Nahshon Wright is at his best at, alongside Al Harris. Can you keep Al Harris, right? Is he a guy that gets some defensive coordinator consideration this offseason elsewhere? And so there's a lot that goes into putting your puzzle together. And that group there's so much talent and there's so many possibilities, but now you have to make the right decisions when you're deciding who stays, who goes, who gets what. That's not easy. And so that's going to be a huge thing for both Ben and Ryan to really get their brains wrapped around when in the 3 days after they play their final game this year.
Yeah, and you talk about some of those big contracts, and I think this is the off season where we can, I know fans like to let Ryan Poles cook. They like to have fun with the memes and everything. But I think this is the off season where we're really going to see if Ryan Poles can cook, because the Bears don't have a lot of cap space. Now they can open up a lot of cap space with bonuses and moving stuff around. I'm not saying like they're going to have to cut people and get rid of everyone, but it does offer, Montez Sweat, he's had a comeback season compared to last year. He makes a lot of money. DJ Moore makes a lot of money. Jalen Johnson makes a lot of money. Tremaine Edmonds makes a lot of money, and they could get out of the Edmonds deal, but Edmonds has been very good when he's been on the field this year. So they have a situation this year where I feel like in the past, Ryan Poles, if the draft picks didn't work out, he could just pay a guy and put a veteran in there because he had plenty of cap space, because he tore up Ryan Poles' entire roster and started anew. But this year, now that Poles has kind of pushed the team up against the cap, which he should do, that's not a criticism.
Right.
But now the decisions are really going to have to be made, because Odengbo not getting much of a return there. Grady Jarrett not getting much of a return there. And you can't just dump these guys. They still have guaranteed money coming in 2026. The Bears are going to have to walk a tightrope here in this offseason and try and figure out who stays and who goes.
The Dangbo ones I hadn't even thought about in a few weeks, because he's been on IR, and then you think, oh man, they've got it. That's going to be something that weighs them down a little bit as well. Don't forget also that on the Thursday night of draft weekend, they're not going to be picking until late in the 9 o'clock hour. We're used to the draft starting and the Bears are on stage, and this is going to be a different experience with them picking in, conceivably in the 20s, right? Like by the time we get there. And so like, you're not going to have that draft capital at the top of days 1 and days 2 that are going to allow you to really make some bigger splashes. That's going to be a factor in this whole thing as well.
Yeah. And now looking ahead here, the Cleveland Browns this week, obviously this is a game they need to have. It's a very winnable game. Yeah. It's at home. It's a touchdown plus point spread. But at the same time, I will sit here and say, I think some Bears fans just circled it and said win. And of course, obviously it's one they should win. But between Myles Garrett, between a feisty defense, Shedeur Sanders looks, pretty good the last couple of weeks, at least much better than what they've had at quarterback. Harold Fannon's a good piece. This Browns team, I feel, is better than their record. Again, they're not what the Bears are. They're two very different places, but this is not a walkover for Chicago either, at least not in my eyes.
Well, look, they can be scary defensively, and obviously that all starts with Myles Garrett. And so you have to come ready to have a plan for him. And then whatever plan you have for him, you're going to have to figure out how to compensate for what you're leaving, unplanned for, essentially. I do have faith in the Bears coaching staff more than I've had in a long time, that they, on both sides of the ball, can put together a sensible and winning game plan to go attack this football game. I think Dennis Allen is going to be able to find answers to make Shedeur Sanders uncomfortable. You probably are aiming for, 4 sacks and 2 takeaways in this game, right? Like that should be a realistic target in order to get this game in your column. But they cannot lose this game. They absolutely cannot lose this game. It becomes panic central if they drop this game, fall to 9-5, and then have to bring the Packers back on a short week to Soldier Field for a primetime game. And so you've got to be locked in. And again, I think this team all year has been, one of their gifts has been the ability to lock in. You would trust in the coaching staff, you would trust in the veteran leaders to get that tone set as soon as they get back in the building and back on the practice field. And then again, just understand what this game plan is and then go attack it. If you do that successfully, you're walking out of Soldier Field with a sigh of relief on Sunday, and you're saying, okay, now we get our second swing at Green Bay. And if we can manage to split with them, we're probably back on top of the NFC when that game ends. And so that's a really nice thing to be chasing. But again, it takes daily focus on every last little detail to get that done.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just finish with this one, because I think this is interesting and you know, in terms of the success level of this season, because like you talked about, the Bears were the 1 seed, they lose one game, they drop to the 7 seed. And the Detroit Lions are, you know, a half game back in essence, because they've got the tiebreaker currently on them, you know, behind them in the 8th spot in the NFC. So it's very clustered together. The Bears could actually very easily go 11-6 and miss the playoffs, which would be a really tough pill to swallow. But if they happen to beat Cleveland and Green Bay and then lose to San Francisco and Detroit finishes 11-6, the Bears are out of the playoffs. Like that's just something that's going to happen. So is it to be a successful season? Is it already a successful season, or have expectations changed where they need to make sure they're a playoff team? I'm not saying they need to be the 1 seed or win the division. Do they need to be a playoff team? In Dan Wiederer's eyes, what is now success for the 2025 Chicago Bears?
Well, I will write successful season in pencil right now, but obviously there's 4 games left to play, and they've got to comport themselves very well in those 4 games for me to change that to a Sharpie. I love the fact that this team has earned the opportunity to play these very meaningful December and early January games. I think it's great experience, regardless of how the season ends, for this group to feel that pressure and to understand what those stakes are. I mean, look, like we had conversations last week in the locker room with a guy like Jalen Johnson, who, you know, when the Bears went to the playoffs his rookie season, he wasn't in that playoff game. And so this is the first time he's been, you know, chasing the goal of playing in a playoff game. DJ Moore has never been on a winning team before in his career. And so like, this is new for some of these guys. And so to get this experience, to understand what this is all about on the next tier up is huge. So, you know, like if they lose 2 or 3 more games in the fashion that they lost Sundays at Lambeau Field, I think you can say, okay, you know, just didn't go their way down the stretch of a season that was pretty impressive with the way they turned things around. But you do have to play a competitive and winning brand of football in these last 4 games, and then you just kind of see what fate has in store for you. They've made a ton of growth. The quarterback has made progress. The head coach has clearly set a culture and a standard this season. So I think there's a lot here that you wrap your arms around and say, this is really, really meaningful toward the long-term growth of this franchise. And now you just want to put those finishing touches on it. And it's not going to be easy because, as you mentioned, these last 4 games are challenging in their own way, and they're against really good teams. And you've got to find a way to do what you can to get yourself into the playoffs. And if not, then you just kind of step back and you figure out how you evaluate the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There he is, Dan Wiederer of The Athletic. And of course, the Take the North pod. Make sure you check him out at The Athletic. And of course, Take the North pod wherever you get your podcast. Dan, thank you for that interview. Enjoy doing it in positive circumstances this time. And hopefully that'll continue moving forward.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, it is really, really cool to walk into a stadium on Sunday in December and know that the game means something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great change of pace, and we have Ben Johnson to thank for it.
Yes, sir.
All right. There he... All right, try that again. Coming out in 3, 2, 1. All right, there he is, Dan Wiederer of The Athletic. Excellent chat there with Dan. Always a measured, good approach and some positivity from Dan. I know a lot of Bears fans over the years were sick of his negativity. Well, unfortunately, he was covering a bad football team. Negativity is going to come with the space, but a lot more positives. Still measured. Still wants to see some things improve in certain areas, but you certainly have to like Dan's perspective on the team, who's been covering this team for a long time and been covering a lot of long seasons. Before we get to the mailbag, I just want to talk to you guys about Rula. Taking care of your mental health shouldn't be harder than taking care of your physical health. If you pull a muscle, you go see a doctor. But when it comes to finding the right therapist, suddenly it's frustrating. You've got long wait lists, or you're staring down huge out-of-pocket costs. That's what usually stops people from getting help. But that's where Rula comes in. Rula makes therapy simple, affordable, and fast. They work with major insurance plans, and your average session copay is just $15. $15. That's basically the cost of a lunch, but instead of a sandwich, you're investing in your own headspace. And with Rula, you're not just matched and left to figure things out. They check in and make sure you're actually making progress. Every therapist on the platform is licensed, vetted, and picked for their expertise. So you know you're talking to someone legit, not just whoever happens to be available. Getting started couldn't be easier. You answer a few quick questions about what matters to you, and Rula connects you with in-network providers who actually fit your needs. You pick the time. You could be talking to a therapist as soon as the next day. No weeks of waiting, no endless back and forth. Bottom line, if you've been putting this off, Rula takes away the excuses. Simple, affordable, and actually built to help get you better. You can find the right hit without a hassle. They have over 15,000 licensed therapists. Like we said, it's affordable. In some cases, your copay may be $0. It might even be cheaper than the $15. You get full support from Rula from start to finish. Top tier providers only. No, the Cracker Jack box guys coming out and helping you with your therapy. Everything you need is in one place. So thousands of guys have already started using Rula to finally get the care they need. Don't put it off. Go to Rula.com/gridiron. That's the Second City Gridiron code. Make sure you put in Rula.com/gridiron to get our special deal. That's RULA.com/gridiron. And hopefully you can take control of your mental health and get everything headed in the right direction. Let's get going with the mailbag, and we'll give you a quick prediction as well, like we always do. Let's jump in here, and our first question is from questions and comments. Mark C., who says, I'm more encouraged by the Bears after the loss to Green Bay on the road than I was encouraged by the fluky tight wins over the Raiders, Commanders, Saints, Bengals, Giants, Vikings, and Steelers. And I think there is a lot of truth to that, Mark C., and that's why I said perspective on this. Now, we'd much rather have the Bears chalking up victories. They're not going to win every game. Nobody in the history of the league, other than the 72 Dolphins, has won every game. That's just not going to happen. So bottom line here is the Bears are figuring things out. The Bears team this week is better than the Bears team that beat the Commanders. They are just a better football team now. They have steadily improved throughout the year. They are starting to get healthier, other than this Kyler Gordon thing, which is he just can't get on the field this year. It is frustrating with that aspect, but I'm with you. The Bears, what was that problem? For months, Bears are a fluke. They're not any good. They're just beating bad teams. Well, now they beat the Eagles. They had a chance to beat the Packers on basically the last play of the game. Came up short, frustrating for sure, but bad teams don't beat good teams or play good teams down to the wire. Good teams do that with good teams. The Bears are not. No one is talking about that the Bears suck anymore. That is gone. That is gone. Now the question is, how good are the Bears? Are they good enough to make a Super Bowl? Now, again, there's national media. There's a lot of doubt still if they are a Super Bowl contender, and that's fine. The only win they have that puts them in that boat is the Eagles. But go beat the Packers at home, beat the 49ers or, lose to the 49ers by a field goal. And people are going to start saying, look, the Bears, they probably aren't going to the Super Bowl, but they can beat anybody in the league, and they're proving that. They're feisty, and they're going to be dangerous in the playoffs. No one's calling them a fluke anymore. That narrative has died. Now it's just a question of just how good are they. Steve Farrell Since I'm the only person from Illinois between my wife and kids, they begged me to go to the Mars Cheese Castle when we went on a family trip. The fam got to try their first ever fresh cheese curds. By the way, when does Kyler Gordon change the habits that keep getting himself injured? Well, Steven, first of all, yes, I made a wisecrack comment. I like making a wisecrack comment about the Mars Cheese Castle because I think it's hilarious. You get into Wisconsin, and the joke on Wisconsin is it's nothing but cheese up there. And within like the first 10 miles, you get the giant Mars Cheese Castle on 94 or whatever that is up in Wisconsin. But to answer your question about Kyler Gordon, like, is it enough? And I don't know. I don't know enough. I think, direct your questions to Bare Bones with Mason West and let him answer that. He's far more of an expert. I am not an expert in soft tissue injuries and what's going on here. So I'm not going to pretend to know what Kyler Gordon's training habits are. I'm not going to pretend to know if they're good training habits, if he's got bad habits. I also wonder, is it fair to question this Bears strength and conditioning staff? Because there's a lot of this, a lot of soft tissue. Austin Booker missed. We had a problem with that. Grady Jarrett's been banged up. Tremaine Edmonds having issues. TJ Edwards, Noah Sewell, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon. Like, we're seeing a lot of problematic injuries throughout the course of the entire season. It's a lot of soft tissue stuff. Now, again, it's football. It's a war of attrition. I get all that. I'm not saying the Bears should be, injury-free. That's just not going to be possible. But at the same time, is it fair to wonder if the Bears as a whole need to train their roster differently? Do they need to change the approaches as to how they're doing things? I think it's fair to question it. And if Mason West or other people are like, Bill Zimmerman is a moron, he doesn't know what he's talking about, that is correct. I don't, but I can observe a lot of soft tissue injuries and wonder if there's something going on with the Bears training techniques that need to be tweaked. Charlie Branchard saw a radio host claim that these were the same old Bears since they lost against the Packers on Sunday. Do you agree with that sentiment? I believe Charlie's referring to Mark Grody of The Score, and I love The Score. And there are plenty of Score hosts that have been on this show over the years. Mark has not. I don't know Mark. I'm not going to sit there and make opinions or determinations about Mark because I don't know him. But I do not agree with that statement, and I think that is a really, I hate to call it a lazy take, but I think it's a lazy take. I think if that's what you got out of this game, then you're just not watching the same football team I'm watching. You're not watching, most importantly, you're not watching the same coach that I'm watching, because that's where the same old Bears are. The same old Bears are from a lack of leadership, right? Like, bottom line here, Mike Ditka beat the snot out of the Green Bay Packers. Now, the Packers weren't good in the 80s. That certainly helped. But Ditka hated that team from his playing days. He wanted to beat the crap out of them. Forrest Gregg was the coach then, was a dirty, dirty coach. The Packers had the attitude, if you can't beat them, hurt them. And that's how the Packers played against the Bears in the 80s. It was a lot of cheap crap. And Ditka wanted to beat the piss out of them. That's why he took out the fridge and pulverized, of all the touchdowns that William Perry scored, 2 of them were against the Packers for a reason, because Mike Ditka hated the Green Bay Packers. So Ditka beat the Packers. Wannstedt didn't have a particularly good, career. Didn't really beat the Packers. Same with Duran. Lovie Smith comes in and says, I'm going to beat the Packers. Bears were pretty good under Lovie. They beat the Packers. Tressman couldn't. Nagy couldn't. Fox couldn't. Eberflus truly couldn't. Eberflus, the only coach in Bears history that never beat the Green Bay Packers, because Thomas Brown beat the Green Bay Packers. So bottom line here, Ben Johnson, I guess, is the other coach who's never beat the Green Bay Packers. He's 0-1. But bottom line here is, this is not the same old Bears. This is it's palpable. The change that this franchise is making this year is palpable. This is not 2018. And I know we had our hopes up in 2018 because we said Nagy and Pace were going to be the guys. And then we found out Ryan Pace could not sustain a roster, and Matt Nagy could not handle adversity, and they didn't have the quarterback, and everything fell apart. And we don't know 100% if Caleb Williams is the quarterback. We can certainly believe it, and it's trending that way right now, but we don't know that's for certain. But I don't know how you can watch how Ben Johnson operates, what he's done to flip this team's attitude, what he's done for how this team prepares, attention to detail, the offensive scheme, the play calling, what bringing in Dennis Allen, bringing in this coaching staff, everything he's done, and call this the same old Bears. Same old Bears because they lost to the Packers. Well, guess what? The Bears who sucked, the same old Bears still beat the Packers every once in a while. Yeah, it was only like 1 out of 5 times, but they did it. Does that mean that those weren't the same old Bears? No. Same old Bears mean it's an ass-backwards organization that doesn't know what they're doing. The Packers are a good organization, so the Bears get the snot kicked out of them. That's not what happened. That's not the same old Bears. This is the changing of a guard in Chicago, and if Mark Grody or any other radio hosts don't see that, that's on them. That is a take, Charlie, that should be ignored. Here's a response to that from Camp Cook, Packer fan here. That's just rage bait. I saw a Bears team that is going to be a problem in the very near future in the division. There you go. Camp Cook, intelligent Packers fan. See, I told you they existed. Not quite as rare as a unicorn, but not too much above that. Camp Cook, that is a good response. And that's what it is. And look, Chicago is certainly a big brother to Green Bay in terms of cities and towns, right? But if we're fair, right now, over the last 35 years, Packers are the big brother to the Chicago Bears, right? That's just what it is. I hate to call ourselves the little brother as a franchise, not as a city, as a franchise. That's where they've been the last 35 years. And to me, this is, and if you've had siblings, brothers, sisters, doesn't matter, and you played sports with them, and, you always had the upper hand in one-on-one basketball. And you beat them and you beat them and you beat them and you beat them and you beat them. And it was, you're playing a 15, ones and twos, make it, take it, whatever it is. And you're winning 15-5, 15-6, maybe 15-10. They had a fluky game. Then there was that game. And you won 18-16. They even had the lead at 13-12. And you were starting to sweat. And you pulled it out. You had to win by 2. You won 18-16. You couldn't even finish it off at 15. Had to get to 18-16. And you won. And you said, you still can't beat me. And you got all cocky and you puffed out your chest and you ran inside. And he said, I want a rematch. You said, not right now. I got homework to do. Whatever. It didn't matter. You just wanted to get the hell out of there because you went, little brother's coming for me. My father never lost to my brother or I in any individual sport. I remember I lost to him in basketball by a bucket. He never played me a game. My brother was a junior Olympian swimmer. He was 5 years old. My dad just touched him in a 25-yard sprint. Never swam against my brother again. He played my brother in tennis, 7-6 in a tiebreaker in a set. Never played. My dad did not want to lose to his sons. I respect it, man. But he would play us in any sport, and the instant we got close, let's play a new sport. That's tough, man. You don't want to lose that upper hand. And the Packers fans, they know. They may not lose the upper hand, but it's going to be really hard to hold on to it. And I think eventually they will, in fact, lose that upper hand. All right, Bears dubs. I don't know if you saw it, but on the last third down of the game, I'm pretty sure Theo got subbed in for Ozzie on that run play that got stuffed. Why do you think they did that? I thought Ozzie held his own all game. He has shown enough to be the left tackle next season. All right. I did not see that. I'd have to go back and look. Now, Theo was the third tackle, and he was coming out when the Bears went big and went 6 offensive linemen. I don't know if Theo came in and you thought he was getting subbed out. He was getting subbed in for Ozzie, and he wasn't. If he did get subbed in for Ozzie, the only thing I would say is Theo's a better run blocker than Ozzie. So again, I'm not sure exactly where that was, but let me jump ahead to the next question. Has he shown enough to be the left tackle next season? He's showing enough, and again, we got 4 games left, so there's plenty of data points still to get put in place here. He's showing enough to be in the mix, and that's important. I think the Bears need to be in a position where Ozzie's their guy, whether it's left tackle, right tackle, Darnell switches, whatever they decide to do, I'm going to have to trust that. But they need to have Ozzie be the left tackle this season. Moving forward, because they just don't have the money to spend on another left tackle. And they're going to have some holes, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They need to draft some defensive players up early in this draft in the first and second day. So if they're having to spend on a left tackle, that's going to put them behind the 8 ball defensively as well. So when I look at this, I think he is showing enough right now. He needs to continue that, and he needs to keep improving. And hopefully, yes, he can be the team. He doesn't have to be amazing. Below average left tackle next season is okay. He just can't be a turnstile. So if that happens, then yes, I think the Chicago Bears would be in really good shape, because if you can, no one else is going anywhere, right? So if Trapillo stabilizes that left tackle, the Bears are going to have, in essence, the same offensive line for 2 consecutive years. And that's not something we've seen a lot. They have not had a lot of stability. They have had a lot of guys changing positions. They have not had the same guys in those positions. And if they can do that, the Bears offensive line can build up chemistry like the Eagles did, like some of these really good offensive lines did, because they had the same group of guys. Maybe every once in a while they'd lose a guard and replace them with a guard, but the other 4 guys were the same. They had consistency. That goes such a long way. You need to be able to know exactly what that guy next to you is doing. You need to just have that chemistry, that connection, that kinship to know exactly when to chip, when to let go of the chip, when he's got his guy, when he's going to need that extra split second of you holding the block. You can feel that over time, but it doesn't happen overnight. And that's why this Bears offensive line looks a hell of a lot different now than it did in September, because they are getting that way. And if they can keep this offensive line consistent next year as well, it's going to do wonders for the Chicago Bears. So let's wrap this up with the mail bag. Cleveland Browns got to win. They lose this one, plain and simple. Bears fans, whatever ridicule comes, whatever criticism comes, is what it is. The Bears need to win this game. They are a far better team than the Cleveland Browns, but the Cleveland Browns are not an easy team to beat. They are scrappy. They have a really good defense. Myles Garrett is a defensive terrorist. He is going to be in the backfield. I don't care if it's Darnell Wright. I don't care if it's Ozzie Trapillo. He is going to win plenty of reps. The Bears have to figure out how to neutralize him. He is averaging like 2.5 sacks per game since mid-October. It's obscene what he's doing right now. He's already got 20 sacks on the season. So Shedeur has improved that offense. He's made it more functional and a little more dangerous. I don't think Shedeur is amazing. I think Dennis Allen is certainly going to be able to confuse him with some looks. Bears are going to get a couple turnovers off of him. I do believe that. I do believe the Bears are going to win this game, but I don't think the Bears are going to cover the 7-point spread. Now, again, does that mean they can't win 27-10? Oh, they can absolutely win 27-10. But I think this is it's going to be cold. I think this one is kind of a Bears 20, Cleveland 16, something like that, where Cleveland covers, Bears win. I'm not saying that Bears are going to have to come from behind and win. It's not going to be comfortable because it's going to be within a touchdown, but I do think the Bears hold on and win this one. I don't think Shedeur is going to be ready for a Dennis Allen scheme. Hopefully the Bears inch closer to getting a little healthier this week. We will see. Hopefully Rome Odunze is back, and that will certainly help the Bears passing game, because he was definitely missed, because obviously he is Caleb's favorite target. We'll talk about it next week. Bear down, everybody. Talk to you soon. Adios.